system and present something bogus in the name of a newly invented process of yoga. Well, the only real yoga is bhakti yoga. All other yogas are to achieve bhakti yoga. The uh, uh, the only way that one can actually please the Lord. You don't please the Lord just by doing different uh, physical exercises or breathing exercises and things like that. You actually please the Lord by engaging in devotional service with love and devotion. Now we're talking about the real yoga. And so it all depends on devotional service. It doesn't depend on physical, let's say, positions of the body. When one actually engages, or it doesn't depend on breathing exercises either. Those things may be okay for a temporary relief from pain or something like that. But the real principle of yoga is to connect to Krishna. And one connects through devotional service. Okay, so, and then Kapila Muni says, I shall explain the ancient system which I once explained to the great sages because they were also anxious to hear about it. When we have a super excellent process already present in Vedic scriptures, there is no need to concoct a new system to mislead the innocent public. At present, it has become a fashion to reject the standard system and present something bogus in the name of a newly invented process of yoga. Okay, well, that eliminates all these modern yogas, hot yoga, cold yoga, no yoga, yes yoga, and this yoga and that yoga. Okay, text 15. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There is a distinction here between Krishna consciousness and Maya consciousness. Gunesu, or Maya consciousness, involves attachment to the three material modes of nature, under which one works sometimes in goodness and knowledge, sometimes in passion, and sometimes in ignorance. These different qualitative activities with the central attachment for material enjoyment are the cause of one's conditional life. When the same Cheta or consciousness is transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or when one becomes Krishna conscious, he is on the path of liberation. Text 16. When one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed, produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. So this syndrome of I, me, and mind is something that is called the false ego, or falsely identifying with the body. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kama and lobha are the symptoms of material existence. Everyone always desires to possess something. It is said here that desire and greed are the products of that false identification of oneself with the body. When one becomes free from this contamination, Then his mind and consciousness also become freed and attain their original state. Mind, consciousness, and the living entity exist. Whenever we speak of the living entity, this includes the mind and consciousness. The difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. In the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system. As explained in the Narada Pancharatra, one's mind and senses should be purified. Tat paratvena nirmalam. One's senses must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified, and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, the kama and lobha, in other words, these are symptoms of material existence. So we have to be free of this lust and greed. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by associating with genuine devotees and engaging in a bona fide uh, devotional service to the Lord without any desire and greed. Uh, and here it says that desire and greed are the products of false identification of oneself with the body. Okay, so what's the first thing we learn in Krishna consciousness? I am not this body. Prabhupada always emphasized that I am not this body. What am I? Well, I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. This body is a temporary thing, but the eternal service for Krishna is an eternal thing. So the body is ephemeral. It's going to come and go. It goes through, birth, and then there's growth, and then you stay for some time, and then you begin to dwindle, and then you die. So those are some of the different stages of the body. But the soul is eternal; it cannot die, and therefore we should pay more attention to the soul than to the body. The body is destined to die, but the soul lives forever. So, and therefore, we should live on the level of the soul rather than the level of the body. Most people live on the level of the body, so they will do whatever they can to maintain the body as long as they can. But the body is destined to be born, to grow, to stay, to dwindle, and eventually die. So, this lust and greed are the symptoms of material existence. Everyone always desires to possess something. It is said here that desire and greed are the products of false identification of oneself with the body. When one becomes free from this contamination, then his mind and consciousness also become free and attain their original state. Mind, consciousness, and the living entity exist. Whenever we speak of the living entity, this includes the mind and the consciousness. The difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. In the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system. As explained in the Narada Pancharatra, one's mind and senses should be purified. Tat paratrena nirmalam. One's senses must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified, and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Well, it's the solution to life's problems. But this can only happen. In other words, what is this? This meaning kama and lobha, lust and greed. These are the two symptoms of material existence, lust and greed. And however, it is possible to free oneself. That's why this verse says, when one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed, produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. So the first thing that we learn from Prabhupada's lectures and his books is, I am not this body. Now, to not identify with the material body is difficult for most people. They think that I am this body. And from that, they build up a gigantic edifice of false identification called the false ego. But to purify oneself of this false ego and identify oneself correctly, it requires the association of elevated devotees who explain how to free oneself from false identification. It's by regular hearing of the Vedic knowledge and engaging in practical devotional service. Then we have a chance of freeing ourselves from the false identification of I, me, and mine. Actually, nothing belongs to us. We are given certain things on a temporary basis. They're loaned to us by the mercy of Krishna, but everything belongs to Krishna. So whatever is loaned to us, we should use it in Krishna's service. But if we think, oh, this is mine, well, that's the beginning of the false ego. I, me, and mine. And it's very difficult to get rid of that false ego until we actually hear genuine devotional service or knowledge of devotional service and the benefits of becoming a genuine devotee without material desires. One can have plenty of spiritual desires, but material desires are always entangling. And when the mind is full or contaminated with all these material desires, it's very difficult to function in the right way. Functioning in the right way means one develops love and devotion for Krishna and shares it with others. So here Prabhupada says mind, consciousness, and the living entity exist. When we speak of the living entity, this includes the mind and consciousness. The difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. Well, let's be honest. I mean, material happiness and distress, they're just part of life. But when we become transcendental to material happiness and distress, we can begin our spiritual life and develop that so we're no longer disturbed by material happiness and distress. In the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system. As explained in the Narada Pancharatra, one's mind and senses should be purified. Tatparatmena nirmalam. One's senses must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified, and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. So the more we're engaged in bona fide devotional service, the more our mind becomes purified of corrupt desires and corrupt activities, and then we become free from the false ego and all the false identifications that we develop in life. So, what is the real ego? Ego means I am. So, if I am, uh, um, uh, if I am this body, that's the false ego. If I am the eternal servant of Krishna, that's the real ego. So there's different I ams. But the real I am is that I'm the eternal servant of Krishna and I engage in the service of Krishna. Now, the false edifice of I am this body is gradually purified. We don't destroy things, we purify things. This is the difference between Mayavad philosophy that tries to dismantle the, let's say, um, false ego, and Krishna consciousness, which tries to purify false ego. There's a big difference. When you dismantle something, basically you destroy it. Right? When you purify something, now you put it in its original state, a pure devotional service. So the Mayavadis, they try to dismantle things. And devotees, they try to purify things. That would be what you'd say the major difference between those two philosophies. Can you dismantle things? Yeah, you can try, but it will never be complete. Otherwise, you would have to kill yourself. But this is what the Mayavadis try to do. They want to end up in a solitary, let's say, cave can meditate on the tip of their nose or on nothing and avoid the contact with the world. So this is called silent meditation. Right? But the devotees are not interested in silent meditation in a lonely place. And devotees are very active in serving Krishna with love and devotion. So they don't engage in silent meditation. They engage in active meditation through devotional service. So our devotion, our let's say meditation is active, and the Mayavadi's meditation is not active. It's based on silence and not and without the movement of the mind and the body. But devotees are engaged in active devotional service, and their mind is focused on pleasing Krishna, and they're active in pleasing Krishna. Whereas the Mayavadis, they try to stop all interaction with the material world and people and service and things like that. And that's basically impossible. You may be able to do it for some time. Just like, if you go to a Mayavadi program, they do meditation. How long do they meditate? Some people meditate 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. Other people might go and meditate for about an hour or 2 hours. And if one becomes, more of a serious so-called Mayavadi meditator, they might meditate 10 hours, 15 hours. They might meditate 24 hours, but eventually their meditation is broken and they have to start all over again. The whole point of the Mayavad, let's say, yoga is to meditate eternally, or at least they try, and try to avoid all uh, connection to the world. So that is not possible, but yet they try to make it possible by this silent meditation. So when you go to let's say, a Mayavadi program, what do? You meditate. You ever been to one of those things?
Very fortunate.
Yeah, they're just people are there. They sit in a lotus position. They have their prayer rug or something like that, and they just sit down and they meditate. Right? Meditate on what? Nothing or something, but they focus on one thing, or they try not to focus on anything. So this is uh, it's a method, but it doesn't really work. Everyone is going to be interrupted from their yoga or their so-called meditation, not yoga, but their meditation. So the telephone will ring, or someone will break silence and say something. Um, so they try, though. They try. They have these seances or these programs where you stay silent for 10 days. Vipassana, right. And but yet they still come back to normal life. So the body and the mind is not made for being uh, that's what you would call inert. Um, the body needs inertia, activity, and body and the mind needs inertia or activity. And when that activity is Krishna conscious, that means that the mind and the senses have become purified. when that activity is an artificial attempt to stop the mind and desires and engage in silent meditation. That may be possible for a little bit of time, but it cannot be something that you do for the rest of your life. Although people try to do it, but some people meditate an hour a day. Some people, silent meditation. Some people meditate, let's say, 10 hours a day. Right? But you're not going to be able to do it 24 hours a day, every day. There are some people that try and do that. They're very rare. But even then, they fail because they have certain responsibilities in life. You would have to stop all accepting any responsibility in life and stay in a private place where there's no telephone, there's no cell phone, and no, let's say, interaction with the world. And you just focus your mind on something. There are very few people that can do that. You can do, of course, you can do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, or some kind of yoga like that, but you're not going to do it 24 hours a day. The ones that try to do it 24 hours a day, they can do it for some time, but they'll eventually break it. They won't be able to do it all the time. Why? Because that's not the real nature of the soul. The soul is active and it thrives on association with other souls. It's not a solitary thing. You can try and make it solitary, and that might work for a little while, but eventually one will seek association. On the other hand, Krishna consciousness is based on association. You associate with Krishna, you associate with devotees, you are active in devotional service, you are always conscious of duties in life, like chanting 16 rounds every day. Do the Mayavadis chant 16 rounds every day? Some of them have beads, but that's like it's like you want to get you want to reach the second floor of a building, so you get a ladder, and when you climb to the second floor using the ladder, and you get up there, then you throw the ladder away. This is basically what the Mayavadis do. They try and get the so-called higher level of consciousness through silent meditation, and then they throw away any possibility of becoming Krishna consciousness, because Krishna consciousness is based on relationships, and the most important, and what is the most important or highest level of relationship is uh, having devotional service for the Lord. So they're not seeking to be inert. Whereas the Mayavadi, he wants to be inert. He wants to close down the all sensual interactions. But the devotees don't want to destroy the sensual sensual life. They want to purify it. There's a difference between destroying something and purifying something. Like, for example, let's say you have a gold ring and it's a little bit bigger for your finger. And one day while you're walking down the street, it might fall off your finger and fall, let's say, in a dirty place. So what do? Do you say, "Oh, my ring is in a dirty place. I can't use it anymore"? No, you pick your ring up and you wash it and you put it back on your finger, right? So this idea of trying to be free of contamination by meditating silently and giving up, let's say, activity and relationships in the material world is temporary. It's not going to work. It can work for some time, and it might work for a long time for certain exceptional people. But ultimately, one will break that type of silent meditation. Now, there are examples of this. Um, there was the examples are when people try to eliminate connection with anyone else in the world and try and meditate on either nothingness or just some kind of oneness. Uh, it's very easy for them to break that um process by one little thought will break it. In other words, you would have to stop all thoughts. Now, every day in our mind, we're thinking of so many things. Is it possible to stop that? It may be possible for a short period of time, but you can't stop it, you know, forever. You know. So why? Because people thrive with having relationships with other people. And the best relationship is with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When you try and distance yourself from relationships and try and meditate on the void, now you're doing something that is not natural. That's not the life of a person. The life of a person is based on relationships and activity. So you're trying to do something that is actually impossible. It can be done for some time, but it cannot be done forever. Like, for example, how are you going to eat? How are you going to, maintain yourself physically? Uh, it'll require, breaking your in meditation and going to the supermarket and buying some food, right? And having a job so you have money to buy food. But if you just say, well, I'm just going to sit here and meditate forever, it's not going to work. Um, you will have to stop your meditation to do something to maintain yourself. So these are, let's say, artificial, impossible goals. But therefore, people are satisfied with 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening of meditation. And they call that, oh, meditation. Okay. Then they have vipassana. They'll meditate for, 10 days. Right. But they still come back to normal life. Who is going to go into a dark, let's say, cave and meditate for the rest of their life? You can count those people on your fingers, and they're not really going to do it for the rest of their life. They might do it for a long time, but not forever. So why try and do something that's impossible? What is possible, on the other hand, is to engage in Krishna consciousness, always thinking of Krishna. And the best way to always think of Krishna is to always chant Hare Krishna, Maha Mantra, and engage in devotional service. That's something that's possible. And it achieves the same goal. What is that goal? To keep your mind on Krishna all the time. See? But you don't have to do silent meditation for the rest of your life to meditate on Krishna. You do practical devotional service. That way you're meditating full time on Krishna and you're active. So this, let's call it uh, different ways of doing yoga But the best yoga is bhakti yoga. All the other yogas are meant to help you reach bhakti yoga. If you're, let's say, climbing a ladder, and before you get to the top where of the ladder, you stop in the middle, right? So you haven't really reached your potential, your ultimate goal. So that's what, there's something called the yoga ladder. So if you stop in the middle of your attempt to climb the ladder, that means you haven't achieved the real goal. The real goal is pure love and devotion for Krishna. And and that pure love and devotion is manifested by your active uh, activities of trying to please Krishna always. Now you're meditating 24 hours a day by trying to please Krishna. That's real meditation. But if you say, no, no, I'm going to just, live in a cave and meditate, first of all, they're not going to be able to do it forever. And secondly, uh, that type of meditation is not recommended, right? Real meditation is activity in Krishna consciousness. That you can do the rest of your life. But meditating in a cave, how long are you going to do it? Uh, maybe one day, maybe 10 days, maybe a month, but eventually you'll give up. And because it's not natural to be alone and meditate on nothingness or meditating on some oneness, like, the tip of your nose or whatever. That's not normal. Living entities, human beings, they thrive on relationships. Uh, when you are absolutely alone, they're not really happy being completely alone. They get lonely. But when they have nice relationships, they're happy. So why try and do something that is not natural? The natural thing is to become Krishna conscious. You chant, you dance, you have nice prasadam, and you don't perform in self mutilating activity. Just like there are some demons, and they try and do very severe types of tapasya, like uh, gradually cutting different parts of the body, like really, really heavy duty demons. Sometimes they do this type of tapasya where they cut off a finger and then cut off a hand and then cut off an arm and cut off, different parts. They mutilate their body as tapasya. And all they do is just mutilate the body. They don't really achieve any spiritual, goal. They just mutilate the body, which is a stupid thing to do. But there are people that do it. There are yogis that do it. The self mutilation. So we should stay far away from those type of crazy people. The best thing is to engage the mind and the senses in Krishna conscious activities. Now we're talking about real yoga. Okay. Here, Prabhupada says very clearly, one cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified. And there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Okay, so this is a very clear statement by Prabhupada. We are not involved, we are not trying to uh, stop the mind. which is what the Mayavadis are trying to do. We want to purify the mind, so it always meditates on Krishna. There's a big difference right there. The Mayavadis are trying to stop the mind. The devotees are more interested in purifying the mind. Okay, so in the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. You see, it doesn't say one has to stop the mind and consciousness. No, one has to purify the mind. So we're not interested in stopping the mind and the consciousness. We're involved in purifying the mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system. As explained in the Narada Pancharatra, one's mind and senses should be purified. Tatparatvena nirmala. One's senses can be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally, the consciousness becomes fully purified, and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Haribol. Thank God we have Prabhupada in our life. Otherwise, we get. I remember before I was a devotee, I had a friend of mine, and he was trying to teach me yoga, right? And he was saying, "Well, you gotta meditate. You gotta sit, with your legs crossed, and think about nothing." How can you think about nothing? Is it possible to think about nothing? No. And there's always going to be something that interrupts your so-called silent meditation. And how long can you stay in a state of silent meditation? Well, when you're a young person, it's not going to be very long. You get to be very old, well, maybe you can do that for a longer time. But still, you're going to have to maintain your body somehow. You know, there was this one person who uh, he would do monovrat, silence, especially when he would eat. So he had a vow, not to speak when he's eating. So we would bring, prasadam for him, right? He'd start eating, and then if he wanted something, he'd start going like this. He wouldn't say anything. He'd go like that, meaning he wants something. All that is silliness, nonsense. He's made this vow, not to say anything when he eats. But then when he wants something, then he's making all these hand gestures, He's a ISKCON sannyasi. Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
Then ISKCON sannyasis also they do that.
Not all of them, but there are. Well, I know at least one that does that. They make a vow not to say anything when they're eating. But if they're eating and then they want something, how are they going to, what do? They go like this. They use the hands or something. It's silly, silly nonsense. Now, the question is, did Prabhupada do that? No. No, not at all.
In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Part of that is that Gundicha temple. After clean up, they all eat and with every morsel
They say Hare
they say
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So if you go to the big, let's say, room where they're all eating, you're hearing the Hare Krishna mantra.
And every bite.
Every bite, they say Hare Krishna. Yeah. There's a lot of concocted nonsense, even in Krishna consciousness. Uh, yeah, one time when I was a new devotee, I was told there's uh, there's uh, a, a yogi, a bogey, and a
Rogi.
rogi. Yeah. So if you want to be a yogi, you should only pass stool once a day in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was told this when I joined. You know. I didn't want to be a rogi or a bogey. You know, rogi means you're sick. Bogey means you're nonsense. And I wanted to be a yogi. So, but there was only one toilet in this temple that I was that joined, and there was always a long line. And as soon as you would go into the toilet, people would start banging on the door and say, "Hurry up!" You know. So uh, at the one point, it was very like nerve wracking. You know, you just go into the toilet to pass stool, and right away they start banging on the door. Hurry up! Hurry up! You know. So I went to the temple president. I said, I don't think I can be Krishna conscious, and they said, why not? I said, well, I can't follow all the rules. They said, what rule can you not follow? I said, illicit sex. I said, no, I can control that. Well, what is it? I said, I can't do this thing where you pass stool only once a day, 4 o'clock in the morning, you know. And that means that, as soon as I go into the toilet, they start banging on the door and puts me in anxiety. I have to come out. And then I can't pass stool until the next morning. And he said, well, who told you that? I said, well, I don't know who told me that, but that's what's going on. In other words, you're not allowed to pass stool any other time of the day. It's only that, early in the morning. Right? But we had only one toilet, and there were a lot of devotees. And then he said, they were talking about, there's yogi and there's rogi and there's bogey, and I didn't want to be a bogey, right? But that means you can only pass stool once a day, early in the morning. Yeah, but when you're living with, like, 35 brahmacharis, and there's only one toilet, and as soon as you go in the toilet, they start banging on the door, they won't all want to be ready for a Mongol arti and so forth. So, you're under stress. And finally, I told the temple president, I can't do this anymore. I said, why not? So I can't follow all the regulatory principles. Oh, you're addicted to sex. I said, no, I'm not addicted to sex. Then what is it? I said, I can't follow this rule about you can only pass stool once a day, and before Mongol arti, and I just can't do it. And if I don't pass stool at that time, then I have to wait again 24 hours. So he said, who told you that? I said, I don't know. The other brahmacharis told me that. No, that's nonsense. Don't listen to them. Yeah, sometimes, these mythological ideas come into people's minds, they make things impossible. That was not Prabhupada's program. You can be regulated. That's a different thing, but you can't artificially just say you can only pass stool once a day, right? Otherwise, you're a bogey. And if you pass stool more than once there, you're a rogi. You're sick. Okay. Are there any questions? Yes.
So, Maharaj, how to avoid such these misconceptions? Because when devotees are together, these may come again and again in different forms, different type of ritual or something. So, how to avoid that? And like, because it's many, like in your case example, all the brahmachari were doing. So it's very easy to get inclined. Oh yeah, it might be true. So how to avoid ourselves in that situation?
You have to get the opinion of a more advanced devotee. If you just listen to what all the new brahmacharis say, you can get misled. But you have to take, shelter of a bona fide guru. That's the whole point. Take shelter of a bona fide guru or gurus and get their advice. I don't see any bona fide gurus standing in line early in the morning to pass stool. They got their own room, or they have their, it's just for the neophytes. But the neophytes, if you leave them on their own, they'll come up with all kinds of speculations and make life, difficult. So the idea is to have a bona fide spiritual master. The number one bona fide spiritual master is Srila Prabhupada. Did Prabhupada make a rule like that? No. So therefore, we shouldn't be fooled by these fanatics, to make things impossible to follow. Prabhupada was very practical. So that's the question you should ask. You should say, well, did Prabhupada say this? Where did he say it? Can you show me in the Shastra where he says you can only pass stool once a day? Uh, and if you miss that early time, then you have to keep it in until until the next morning. So that's a valid question. Where did Prabhupada say that? And if they can't show you where Prabhupada said that, then it's nonsense. It's speculation. Okay, no more speculation. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Dandal Pranam Maharaj. So Maharaj, we study today that we can clean our mind and consciousness. Basically, that's the called of liberation or mukti. So, but there are five types of muktis, right? Or liberation, which is like Sayuja, Salakya, I think Samipya, and then Sarupya and Srishti. So first one is basically for maybe people who are doing the Gyan yoga, but for rest of the four, I know that it's for Bhakti yoga. So which mukti generally when we do Bhakti or maybe constant Krishna consciousness means all the time we are thinking about Krishna. So what kind of mukti or we think that we don't even, I mean, the pure devotee doesn't even desire for mukti. So, what exactly is the state we reach?
No, the devotee is not interested in liberation. The devotee is interested in pleasing Krishna through devotional service. There's a difference. That's the difference between the Mayavadis that want liberation and the devotees want service. And they want service by which they can please the Lord. So, and the devotees, they want to please the Lord and the devotees. So, there's a major difference between a devotee and a Mayavadi, or a pseudo renunciate. So we should just follow the example of Srila Prabhupada. So, did he make any rule you can only pass stool once a day? No. So whatever Srila Prabhupada did, that's what we should also do. I mean, we can't emulate Srila Prabhupada, but we can follow his example. Well, his example is very practical, right? He didn't say that you can only pass stool once a day. He didn't say a whole bunch of things that people uh, make up, and they try and convince you you should do like this. We should always say, well, did Prabhupada do this? You know, or did the Vaishnavacharyas do this? So we should always get the opinion of bona fide devotees. And the whole idea is we should not make Krishna consciousness so difficult that no one else can follow it. Or maybe only very, elite one or two or three people can do. It should be something that is doable. And that's what Prabhupada did. He didn't say you have to chant 64 rounds a day. Well, if we sit around chanting 64 rounds a day, we won't be able to do any practical service. It'll be very, very difficult. So he brought it down to 16 good rounds a day. So in other words, let's say it takes 2 hours a day to do that. Of course, if you don't do it early in the morning, it could take you, 4 hours a day. But if you do it early in the morning, you can do 16 rounds and uh, and do it in a nice way. And because early in the morning, there's nothing interrupting you. You don't have to go to work, and you don't have to do this and that. You can just concentrate on chanting. So we have to avoid making things difficult. And the best way to avoid that is go to sleep early, wake up early, and chant your rounds. So that means that you're going to be in a very good consciousness the rest of the day. You want to chant your rounds during the day? Well, you probably will spend the whole day trying to chant your rounds because there's so much interruption. So you have to go to sleep early and wake up early. Then you'll be able to do everything properly. Okay, so the difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. It doesn't say that we eliminate all material happiness and distress. It says we become transcendental to material happiness and distress. Well, what's the word transcendental mean exactly? It means that we've transferred our consciousness to pleasing Krishna rather than pleasing ourselves. Then we're transcendental to material happiness and distress because now we've transferred our consciousness from I, me, and mine to how can I please Krishna and Guru. That's a major change in our life. And if we do that, make that change, then we become transcendental to material happiness and distress. When the mind, yeah, go ahead.
So, Maharaj, maybe let me put this way. So, yes, I understand that as a devotee, we should not hanker for any mukti or anything. But as a devotee also, or just like it's a maybe crude example or material. If we started on some path, particular path, right? We need to have some destination. So, doing all this sadhana, all those things, I mean, pleasing Guru, or all those things, these are means, but not that end what I was looking for. So what should be our ultimate goal? Because we don't want to fall into that mukti also, because some people has the ultimate goal is to mukti. uh, but for us as a devotee in Krishna consciousness, we don't even should hunger for mukti, then what should be our ultimate goal? Just be a servant, but doesn't it fall into still into some kinds of mukti?
Our ultimate goal should be to eternally please Krishna with love and devotion.
Okay.
It's simple. It's not complicated.
Okay, Maharaj, thank you.
You can't please Krishna without love and devotion. But when you achieve love and devotion to Krishna, and he's pleased, you're pleased, everybody's pleased. So the word love is something very special. It's not a common thing. It means that you're going to do a lot of let's say surrender to the Lord to show how much you love the Lord. So you surrender all the bad habits and all the bad sanghas or all the bad association, and remain only in the association of devotees, and be engaged in practical devotional service every day. Now there's no time for nonsense. Right? An idle mind is a devil's workshop, as they say. So our mind should never be idle. It should be always working and thinking how to improve my Krishna consciousness, how to improve the temple, how to maintain good relationships with other devotees, how to speak nicely to people that don't know anything about Krishna consciousness. In other words, you learn the art of being Krishna conscious. And that art of being Krishna conscious is controlling the mind and senses by keeping them focused as much as possible on Krishna. And the way to do that is by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and engaged in practical activities of Krishna consciousness. The more activities of Krishna consciousness we perform, the more our mind stays steady and free from contamination. So it says, in the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. So, you would think, the statement should stop at transcend the platform of material distress. But no, it says transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. In other words, material happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system. As explained in the Narada Pancharatra, one's mind and senses should be purified. Tat Puratmena Nirmalam. One's senses must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish people. There are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally, the consciousness becomes fully purified. There is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Well, that means it's possible to do. Free your mind from material desire and greed by keeping it engaged in Krishna consciousness activities. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified. and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Okay, so that should be our motto. Engage our mind in Krishna. And then naturally, the consciousness becomes fully purified. And there will be no chance of material desire and greed. Yeah, so kama and lobha, material desires and greed, they have to be purified. And this purport begins by saying kama and lobha are the symptoms of material existence. Everyone desires to possess something. It is said here that desire and greed are the products of false identification of oneself with the body. When one becomes free from this contamination, then his mind and consciousness also become freed and attain their original state. Mind and consciousness and the living entity exist. Whenever we speak of the living entity, this includes the mind and consciousness. The difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. Okay, pretty clear. Prabhupada doesn't complicate things. He makes things very clear and achievable. Some people make things complicated and almost impossible to achieve. Okay. Any questions?
Any
If not,
questions?
okay, then we will get all our rounds finished and have nice prasadam and be ready to face the world. Haribol. Jai. Srila Prabhupada.